to Salt Lake City's formal meeting. We're continuing to hold our meetings remotely due to declarations of emergency related to the pandemic and earthquake. While we hold our meetings remotely, we are happy to have you connecting with us online or by phone. We refer to today's meeting as a special limited meeting. It's an additional council meeting outside of our regular schedule. The council has only one new item of business today, and that is to adopt a temporary land use regulation to facilitate a winter shelter on 2300 West and North Temple, which is currently a hotel. There is no general public comment taken during special formal limited meetings, but we do appreciate you joining us. I will move to the only item on our agenda, which is item E1, new business, an ordinance enacting a temporary land use regulation to allow a temporary overflow homeless shelter at approximately 2333 West North Temple. I'll look for a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I move the council adopt an ordinance enacting a temporary zoning regulation authorizing an overflow homeless shelter use at approximately 2333 West North Temple.
Second.
A motion from Councilmember Johnston and a second from Councilmember Valdemoros. Is there any? Oh, I'm sorry, wasn't to you. Who was the second?
It was Amy.
Oh,
Sorry.
thank you. Thank you. Second from Councilmember Fowler. Is there any discussion to this? Just checking to make. Yes, Councilmember Valdemoros.
I would like clarification on the dates that this will be used temporarily. Do we have that information?
I think typically, I'm just going from memory that temporary land use regulations are valid for 6 months unless otherwise stated. But I'm looking for Katie Lewis's tile. Oh, there she is. She's waving.
Hey, hi, council members. Jennifer is exactly right. They are good for up to 6 months. In this case, the expiration is April 15th. That was modeled on the temporary land use regulation that we did last year. And the compelling countervailing public interest in this case is both COVID-19 and the pressures of the winter and our increasing homeless population. So April 15th seemed to be an appropriate date, but of course you could change that within the 6-month period.
Okay, any other question or discussion? Just clicking through to make sure we got everybody. Okay, I don't see any other hands up, so I will go ahead and proceed to a roll call vote. Councilmember Rogers.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Councilmember Johnston.
Yes.
Councilmember Valdemoros.
Yes.
Councilmember Mono.
Yes.
Councilmember Dugan.
Yes.
Councilmember Fowler.
Yes.
And I am a yes as well. That passes unanimously. That is our only item of business. However, some council members have asked to make statements, so I will recognize anybody that wants to take a moment of personal privilege. Councilmember Valdemoros.
Yes, I would like to say a few words, to read a few words. Despite our efforts throughout the year to request a plan way earlier than December from the many charged to help those experiencing homelessness, once again, we find ourselves voting for a winter emergency shelter at the 11th hour. My hope is that we're not having this same conversation again next year. Salt Lake City has gone above and beyond hosting many shelters and providing resources to help our homeless neighbors. I thank all of those that have joined in the effort. District 4 in particular experiences the opportunities to serve and the struggles that accompany the encampments on a daily basis. This is apparent by walking out my front door, looking outside the window of my business, and by the many reminders given to me by residents, businesses, and those visiting our city. Last year, District 7 hosted an emergency window shelter, and this year it is asked of District 1 to do the same. Thank you, District 7, for stepping up, and thank you, District 1, for all you do already to help. I invite the residents of all the districts to engage in Salt Lake City's efforts. I also want to offer my gratitude to Mill Creek's Mayor Silvestrini for his leadership and thank him for his efforts to host a winter emergency shelter. I too agree with Mayor Silvestrini when he recently said, quote, "I feel, and I think the council feels, we have a moral obligation to give shelter, get people off the street in the winter so that they have shelter and don't freeze. We also need to do our part as a community to bear some of the burden for hosting this kind of a facility." I echo his sentiments in again saying that this is not a Salt Lake City issue, but an opportunity for the entire state of Utah to do what we do best, serve and take care of our neighbors. This is beyond an encampment issue. Severe mental health issues and drug addictions are very real, and we need more resources to address them in order to prevent chronic homelessness. I continue to call on the leadership of our neighboring cities and our state officials to step up their efforts to help those suffering from addiction and mental health issues. Do not pass by on the other side, but be moved with compassion and bound up wounds. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Valdemoros. Any other council members wishing to make a statement?
If there's no one else, I would, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Councilmember Johnston.
Thanks. I want to be clear, the comments I will make are mine and mine alone. They may not necessarily reflect the positions of this council, the mayor, or my employer, Volunteers of America, Utah, but I feel strongly they must be made here and now. As a social worker for over 20 years, I am so impressed by and thankful for my fellow city council members, Mayor Mendenhall, our city staff for their support in making this ordinance happen. My gratitude extends, as was said by Anna, to Mayor Silvestrini and the Mill Creek City Council for assisting in opening the Mill Creek Temporary Housing Facility this week. I'm thankful for Midvale and South Salt Lake for hosting homeless resource facilities also. Over the past 3 years, I've attended most state homeless coordinating committee meetings. I've seen the increasing load of homelessness and corresponding requests for resources across the entire state. I participated in forming the Salt Lake Valley Coalition to End Homelessness and served on several task groups. I've seen their efforts to bring awareness to these needs of those struggling without housing, proposing best practices, and having far too little authority or resources to enact good plans. In the past 2 years, I've supported the establishment of the Geraldine E. King Women's Resource Center, as well as the expansion of the homeless outreach programs and youth resource center run by Volunteers of America, Utah. I've seen staff work far too many hours, placing themselves and their families in harm's way throughout the pandemic just to keep as many people off the streets as possible. I have also served on the Salt Lake City Council for 5 years and was a member of the site selection committee for the 2 homeless resource centers in our city. I've listened to probably hundreds of hours of community members' input and often blame Salt Lake City for causing and or not fixing this county and state issue of lack of affordable housing and corresponding unsheltered residents. It is estimated that after the Mill Creek Temporary Housing Facility opens, there will be at least 120 people sleeping tonight on the streets in Salt Lake City, for whom there is no room in the emergency overnight centers. As a city, we face the choice of approving this temporary ordinance or allowing these men and women to remain outside in the snow. I did vote yes to this ordinance because overflow shelter is desperately needed. I'm choosing to do more than our fair share in hosting this overflow program. I support the Switchpoint organization in their efforts to open these needed beds as soon as possible. But make no mistake, I am deeply angry about the blatant inequity that this situation highlights. This motel effectively sits on the border between two of the lowest opportunity areas in our city. I moved to Poplar Grove over a decade ago. I have found it beautiful, ethnically and racially diverse, humble and welcoming, full of unpretentious, multi-generational families who are deeply loyal and proud. My neighbors work harder at more backbreaking jobs than anyone in this county. If there's a place that exhibits Utah values, this is it. I've also watched as COVID-19 has disproportionately devastated these same neighborhoods. I'm seeing healthcare disparities shorten people's lifespans by years compared to more affluent communities. Every elementary school has over 90% of its students qualify for federal school meals because of their income. To put a fine point on this, in zip code 84104, we experience a 26% poverty rate, less than 4 miles from some of the wealthiest neighborhoods in this state. Only 2 other places along the Wasatch Front have a higher rate of poverty: the BYU and University of Utah student neighborhoods. My zip code has the lowest median home values in the entire Wasatch Front, including all of Weber, Davis, Salt Lake, Utah, and Tooele counties. This statistic reflects less on the actual houses and properties and more on the persistent discrimination and stereotypes that are rarely confronted by people outside the zip code. It is obvious by almost any measure that these neighborhoods continue to be economically and socially marginalized. This has been true virtually since the founding of our city. It was cemented when the railroads and later the interstate freeways effectively cut off these neighborhoods from the surrounding areas on all 4 sides. It was overt in redlining low-income and minority families away from housing opportunities in the rest of Salt Lake. Even today, my children experience some of the worst air pollution in this county. None of this is a secret. We have known this for years, and yet here we are, James Rogers, me, and this council, facing the unconscionable choice between standing up for our neighborhoods that have been offered so little for so long and demanding that this lack of affordable housing and emergency shelter be shared by the entire county and state, or alternatively, allowing men and women to experience frostbite, hypothermia, and early death this winter on our streets. I have participated in the State Commission on Housing Affordability that forwarded a bill to the legislature last session to provide one-time and ongoing money for affordable housing that the market cannot and will not create. Currently, Salt Lake City provides more than 2 times the amount of ongoing money for affordable housing than the entire state. That state funding would have helped provide the opportunity for housing many of the people we are currently trying to provide emergency shelter for this winter. No ongoing money was granted. I have attended 2 separate Salt Lake County Council of Governments, COG, meetings this year, where the Salt Lake Valley Coalition to End Homelessness asked for help from other cities in this county to locate temporary overflow shelters. No support was offered. The 9-line redevelopment area has been proposed to provide much needed economic support for the 84104 zip code of Salt Lake City. After over 6 years, it still has not been approved by Salt Lake County. If this neighborhood does not qualify for such public investment tools, I cannot fathom how any other area could. Almost every Friday afternoon for the past 7 months, including a few minutes, I have stood on the corner of North Temple Boulevard and 800 West, meeting with residents, business and property owners, unsheltered citizens, city department representatives, elected officials, police officers, and service providers to brainstorm ideas and address the illicit drug markets, crime, homelessness, and vacant properties in our neighborhood. I have seen firsthand how far our police, fire, and other emergency resources have been stretched, and how fast we are burning through our city department budgets this year. I can understand the economic struggles of many cities during this pandemic, but I would strongly challenge any belief that Salt Lake City has enough money or other resources to care for this county's unsheltered residents and another overflow facility. We do not. We cannot sustain the level of investment we are being asked to make. My fellow council members and I are approving and have approved another overflow program in Salt Lake City, almost a year after promises were made in Sugar House that we would not be asked to do so again. By my count, excluding domestic violence in private facilities, which if they were included would increase this number, Salt Lake City will host 7 of the 10 sites for homeless services this winter. Effectively, all of them are on or west of State Street. We cannot step up and say yes. We continue, to step up and say yes, even when it's difficult and unfair. It is well past time for other leaders to do the same. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnston. I just, sorry.
I don't know if you can see me.
Oh, sorry, Councilmember Rogers, go ahead.
I would like to just reiterate and echo what Andrew has said. His words are perfect, and I'd like to sign a letter and send that to whomever needs to be sent, Andrew. So you can count me in on that. Mr. Chair, and I just want to, as we say that this is going into District 1, but to be honest with you, whatever happens to District 1 really happens to District 2. And there is you can't really differentiate between that, whether it's the prison, whether it's the inland port, whether it's the homeless issues that are going on North Temple. It affects the entire west side from north to south, east to west. It affects us completely. So I just wanted to say that with this going in there, and to be honest, being with this body, the city council body is some of the most honest elected officials I've ever worked with. Everything that we set forth that we're going to do, we actually do. We accomplish what we try to do. And, if we screw up, it's on us, right? Well, here we are in what I feel like is a screw up that's not on us, that we're cleaning up. And we're going to have a real problem, council members. And that's why I'm coming to you here at this setting, is because we already know North Temple is a huge mess. And it's going to get even worse when this is opened for another overflow shelter all along North Temple, now from 2200 West all the way to 8th West, and then to continue to downtown. We're going to be going through the zero budget for the police department. We really have to look at what is the most effective way for us to handle this. And this is an issue because I am so grateful to Councilmember Fowler for how stoic she was last year and taking all the crap that she did and having the overflow shelter up there. I'm really taking a page out of her book tonight to remain calm and cool and collected about it, because it is a serious problem that I cannot stress enough about the West Side being impacted time and time again. Not by us council members, because we're trying to change that and create opportunities and access to opportunities, but it's from outside our boundaries where all of this impact is coming. And I can't stress it enough that it's not just Andrew and I who really have to do that. And this council has been the most outspoken about it, about West Side importance. But we've got to speak out even more about it. Whenever we're in session, it can't just be me or Andrew. Everyone's got to talk about this thing. We've got to stop this. We've got to stop this. We've got to bring this up at every opportunity that we can to say, you don't understand, the West Side is taking his burden. Operation Rio Grande was great for Pioneer Park in that area, but it wasn't good for everybody else, right? It spread it around everywhere to everyone else's community. So this is my big concern, is here we are again. The West Side is going to be taking an overflow shelter. I'm going to remain calm about it. But when we go into budget season, we have really got to focus our monies like we've spoken about, focusing them on the West Side and making sure that we are taking care of these concerns. I mean, you look at whether it's a school issue. I mean, all of the schools on the West Side are Title I schools where they have after free lunch and breakfast opportunities. So we've got to really look at, I don't know how we can get the coalition members to see that this is a real issue. It's focusing and concentrating continual issues on the West Side. And it's not like, oh, it's not going to do anything. Well, it's going to impact police times already. And we know what the police response times are currently. So, Mr. Chair, that's why I voted yes. I'm taking, like I said, a page out of Councilmember Fowler's book. And Andrew, well spoken. I'm 100% behind any letter we need to send out.
Thank you. Unless there are any other comments, I'd like to just say a few words, which is that we're making this temporary rezone today not because it's what the community wants, because it was carefully planned out well in advance, and because it's fair. In fact, the opposite is true. Residents along North Temple want what was promised to them generations ago: safer streets, parks, trails, and other amenities, equitable housing, support for small business, and a grand boulevard that welcomes visitors to Salt Lake City. Today's action doesn't come with any of that, only with funding to mitigate impacts. Residents expect government to anticipate these needs and to plan for them in advance with careful analysis, shrewd investments, and robust community input. Due to circumstances outside our control, This plan had to be put in place in a matter of days without any of that. Residents also want us to be fair, and this is not fair. It's not fair for Salt Lake City, and particularly our traditionally underserved communities on the west side, to continue to shoulder the burden of a statewide crisis, which includes mental health, affordable housing, and employment opportunities, all of the things that cause homelessness, which just happen to confluence within the borders of our city. We're meeting today in spite of all that for the simple reason that we cannot risk people freezing to death. So it falls on us to act. We talk a lot about economic prosperity and unprecedented growth in Utah. Salt Lake City is fortunate to share in that success, but we need the rest of the state. We need the state and other municipalities along the Wasatch Front to own in this humanitarian crisis as well. Thank you in particular to Councilmember Rogers and Councilmember Johnston, and to the communities that you represent. Andrew, I will be there to stand with you again today on 8th West and try to explain this decision to residents as best that we can. I hope that the comments that were expressed today by you two in particular, James and Andrew, will help your residents understand why we had to make the decision that we did. Thank you everybody for being here and making time to be in this emergency meeting. And thank you to staff who did all the legwork to make it possible for us to do this vote and to provide as much notice as possible to the community. Okay, anyone else want to say anything? Okay, then that concludes our business for this meeting. We are adjourned. Thank you.